Welcome and good evening. I hope you're all having a lovely Thursday so far and are getting ready for the weekend. I'm Cynthia and I don't have anybody alongside me today, but please look forward to next week as I will be having one of our lovely interns join us. But today's discussion will be all about conflict resolution in school-aged youth. Just something that's been kind of coming around either through social media or through discussions with our youth. And we feel like it's something that's really important to talk about. But before we get started, I wanted to show our flyer. This flyer has a lot of good information for our upcoming youth talk. It's going to be this Saturday. It'll be from 1 to 2 p.m. They have the QR code down there for you to, to use your phone, scan it, and so you can register, sign up. The topic for this, as you can see, will be run by and facilitated by one of our actual CSU interns from Chicago State. And the topic will be around hookup culture in youth. So that's something that we're going to be talking about there. So please look forward to that. And yeah, so if you want any more information on that, please look at our social medias. We're sharing it in our Instagram, Facebook at CAP Healthy Living and Healthy Living CAP. But yeah, so kind of getting a little bit into the topic for today. We felt like it was important to talk about lack of conflict resolution skills and communication skills in general with youth, school-aged youth more specifically. So thinking more about high school, middle school aged children. We felt like it was something that was really important just because it's been something that we've kind of noticed our team and just trends on, in social media, in the city, and overall in the U.S. I can't speak for other countries, but just from things we've seen and heard about, and I'm sure I've brought this up before and talked about it, but just the prevalence of more, school fights, more confrontations that, turn aggressive and violent between student to student, but also student to teachers or staff. That's been something that's been broadcasted. I mean, there's videos you can find, I'm sure, on Twitter, TikTok, and other platforms, just, things about how they have rules set aside, but they're not being, put to use. And often students don't get consequences for these actions, especially when it comes to things like bullying. Sometimes you'll often hear about how the student who's being bullied and their parents get in more trouble with the school than the actual student who had started the bullying, and things like that too. So I feel like with all of that, it's just really important to kind of talk about these things, even with the groups that I've been doing and that my colleagues and coworkers have been doing. We do youth groups in CPS schools. And even in our own experiences with our kids, we've seen, not very often, but it's been noted and seen about some students that just have issues that are not, revolving classroom safety, and it's just not related to things, going on at school. It's things outside of school, so outside factors. Kids starting arguments over things that have to do with city, because our city, Chicago, is very segregated. Our communities are very divided. So it's kind of a territorial thing that it turns into sometimes, about kids arguing about the streets that they live on and how, to avoid certain areas because they don't belong to that block and things like that. That have been noted in some of our groups too. So that can cause a lot of conflict, which can lead to violence. It can lead to many things. But yeah, kind of going a little bit into it, just kind of things to think about. All of these things, that I bring up today, that's a lot of things that like I said, it's through experience, through seeing on social media, but also just me giving a lot of my thoughts and my insight on these things. And yeah, so thinking about conflict resolution, what is that, right? So maybe not a lot of people know what that is. Maybe not a lot of youth especially know what conflict resolution is. And it's the process of ending a dispute and reaching an agreement that satisfies all parties involved. So finding a solution, right, to the problem. Identifying the problem and figuring out solutions for that problem and making sure that everybody is on the same page at the end of that. Even though, like we think about compromise, right? It's you're willing to give up some things, and the other person is also willing to give up some things to come to some common ground. So why do we feel like, or why do I feel like conflict resolution needs to be talked about more? I feel like just things that I had mentioned before, and also I feel like COVID, that was the thing that I was thinking of. So COVID, had a lot of kids isolated, right? There was a lot of isolation. Kids were behind a screen, not really interacting with a lot of kids. During high school years or transition from 8th grade to high school, right? Their freshman year, it's a big transition. It's something that they're going through alone versus going through it with a bunch of other kids that they can relate to. So they're not really getting that, exercising their brain in that way that kind of gets them to learn about other students' backgrounds, just how to coincide with other people in a room, in a shared classroom, right? And I know we've talked, or I'm sure you've heard about overcrowding in schools. That can also create a little bit of tension with students and teachers as well. And let's see, other things that can cause issues for kids who don't have, those skills. It can also be due to students with low self-esteem, right? Like I kind of mentioned, bullying is one of those things that you can kind of identify through who's the bully, who's the victim, and why this happens is probably because of the bully probably has low self-esteem, and so they don't want to attract any attention onto themselves, so they bring that attention towards somebody else that they feel like they can take advantage of, just to kind of, in a way, protect themselves, right? And so that's kind of what it comes down to. And another thing too, it can also be lack of adult role models. So just, parental figures or just adults in general, if they hang around adults that are not the best influence on their young minds, they kind of learn a lot from the adults around them, right? So they see what they're doing, they pick up on that, and they learn from that. So if they don't have really any good adult role models in their lives, it can lead to these kinds of issues as well. Also thinking about youth culture, right? So thinking about, when I say youth culture, it's a lot of kids hanging around other kids, right? And so with that, sometimes students or other groups of kids will normalize reacting in this kind of way. Also just normalize and encourage it. They can get clout because of it. We've had a whole discussion with our kids about clout and why people or students would even want clout. It's kind of like just getting that acknowledgement that, yeah, I did that, or yeah, I've done this, I've hurt other people, I can hurt you too. Like just wanting to be known for something, right? Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. So that's kind of something that we've talked about with our kids. And also, I'm sure maybe some of you have heard the phrase that a lot of youth say, stand on business. That's something that we've also talked about with our kids, what that means. And basically what that phrase means and what I've learned from them is just making sure that you stand up to what you actually say you're going to do. So you say you're going to do something and you actually follow through with it. So it's following through with an action. So if, people are making threats to each other, like, oh, if I catch you somewhere, I'm going to hurt you. I'm just trying to change the phrase up because I'm not trying to say exactly what the kids are saying. But yeah, just making threats and following through on those threats too. So, for example, one of the things that one of my coworkers had shared with me about an experience she had with one of our youth in her groups is an argument about who knows more about their block, the people on their block, and how, telling another student that, oh, you're not really from there. You're a West Side kid versus a South Side kid. That's kind of what the argument was basically about. And one of them, they were just insulting each other about which side was better, which side is not, and kind of talking about that. And in that same group session, one of those students had ended up calling a family member or someone that they knew, an adult that they knew, talking about, oh, this kid is saying these things. And so now this student has brought in another party into this situation that should have never happened, because of that lack of skills in conflict resolution. So he felt as though he could not handle the argument or the conflict on his own. So he called for essentially backup. And that could lead to a lot of, dangerous consequences. It could lead to arguments and things happening outside of school, people getting hurt, that could be avoided with these conflict resolution skills. But yeah, so thinking a little bit about that, even also thinking about when I said, having bad adults in your life, bad role models in your life, it could be parents who instigate the child's behavior and allows the child to act in this way without consequences, or it could just be the lack of attention, right, that the child is getting, in which the child will start to act out to try to get any kind of attention from their parent, whether it's good or bad. And there have even been instances where I have seen on social media where a student had made a threat to a teacher and said, oh, I'm going to bring my mom tomorrow. And in my head, I'm like, okay, so the mom is going to talk to the teacher. That's not what happened. The mom ended up coming to the school and also started making threats to that teacher that the student complained about. And so that's also like another example of bad role modeling, bad parenting, just displaying those same behaviors that the child will then pick up and learn and think is okay. So that's kind of what I think about when I'm thinking of, parents playing a role in how students handle conflict and things like that. So, what are some of the consequences of student conflicts in or outside of school? So, kind of stuff I had already mentioned, like it can result to violence, lead to violence. That's one of the things. It can start fights. Kids will start fighting at the school, putting potentially other students in danger. I'm sure we know, or have seen or heard from other people or through social media, if you see your friend fighting another person at your school, oftentimes that friend will want to jump in and then want to protect their friend. So then that's just involving so many more parties. The fight can then escalate to something even further. More people will get hurt, especially if it's on school grounds or even outside as well. And then other things that can happen, like I mentioned, bullying. So it can also create fear of just not wanting to go to school because you might feel like it's unsafe, anxiety, and also teachers will probably, start to worry about showing up to school, and they will fear for themselves as well. And I bring up social media a lot just because that's where I've heard a lot of these stories too. And these are like genuine experiences that teachers have shared. And there was one teacher that had shared a different story about how she felt like the school board was not supporting her when she told her staff colleagues that she was scared, that she was getting threats from her students. Students would not listen to her, and things were just kind of getting out of control, and the school was not on her side. And so teachers don't feel supported. They start to feel scared. They start to, either quit their jobs, move schools, and then it never ends up getting resolved. So that's another thing too. And, when I mentioned students will have that fear of going to school because maybe they're getting bullied, right? They won't want to come to school. They'll start missing school, which can lead to unexcused absences, ditching school, putting themselves into further, dangerous situations. And it can lead to something called truancy. And basically, truancy, for those who may or may not know, it consists of student absences that are unexcused and they're consistent. Even if it's not like days in a row, if they, from what I had researched, I found that if students miss 5% of their, if they have 5% of absences, like from the whole school year, which adds to about 9 days, missing 9 or more days equals truancy. So It's consistent absences without, any excuses. So, you can have your excused absences, due to going to the doctor, checkups, therapy, things like that, that you need to miss school for. Those are excused and that doesn't count. But what they're thinking about is just missing school without notifying the school, the parents not notifying the school, and maybe the parent doesn't even know that their child is missing school too. So in other states, just kind of getting a little bit more into truancy, in many states, it is penalized by parents and also the students with a fine. They can be, I believe it's a misdemeanor. I forgot what class of misdemeanor it is, but it is kind of like a crime, right? They can have jail time and also have to pay a fine, which it's already difficult for, parents that are already struggling to either make ends meet and have to take care of other things and also worry about their child going to school. And then adding that fine on top doesn't really help the situation. That's a whole other discussion. But yeah, so that's kind of the consequences to a student who is actively missing 9 or more days of school. So that's a little bit on that. I believe Illinois has changed the law to not penalize them with jail time or a fine. And it's now community service hours from what I have found online, which I could be wrong, so don't take that as fact, but that's just from different articles and from what I tried to find online. But yeah, so that's kind of a little bit about the issues of conflict resolution and the lack of communication skills that these students have. So I guess let's talk more about what is conflict resolution. We talked about that, but also how can we use that and how can we teach that to youth specifically? There's many different guides, many different things that you can find online, resources that'll help teachers and social workers or program leaders, people who work in various programs at the schools that can learn, how to teach these things to students. And there's a guide, there's, like I mentioned, different ways to teach it and different guidelines to teach. But essentially, key points is to find common ground with the kids, get everyone's perspective, and share solutions and decide on a solution together, right? So it's not just one person picking the solution and then, okay, everyone has to be happy with that. No, it's everyone has to decide on something. You have to come to a consensus. But yeah, kind of getting a little bit into it, right? Let's see. So this is also to note that this guide is not like a one size fits all. So these key points, it's not going to work in the same way for different kinds of fights, different kinds of conflict, right? So it really is about situational awareness, which is something we have talked about before, and just checking your environment, seeing what's appropriate to use, when it's appropriate, and just always avoiding escalation of conflict. So the first thing that they say, one of the first options that they say is submission. So submission, when a person submits, they concede to the argument or try to meet the needs of the person with whom they are in conflict. So that's kind of one of the ways they can de-escalate. Something that I have thought of when, looking this up with submission, I feel like this is just me giving my opinion, but submission may not work for youth. Youth definitely, they want to one up each other. They want, in the heat of an argument, in the heat of conflict, one of them will not decide to back down out of fear of looking like the, for lack of a better word, like the weaker person. And neither of them want to come out looking like the weaker person. So I feel like this is one of those strategies that may have to work with either maybe younger kids, maybe elementary age kids. That would be one thing. Another thing is compromise. So compromise typically involves negotiating with the other party to arrive to a solution that will at least partially meet the needs of those involved in the conflict, right? So I kind of mentioned that earlier. When you compromise on something, you're not always going to be 100% happy with the solution. And that's okay. That's not something that is going to be like, oh, everyone has to 100% be happy with it. It's just you all have to agree with it, right? So if two people are arguing and one is saying something, they each get to share, one thing that they want out of this solution and trying to make it work for everybody. So that is something that I feel like is a little bit of a better option for working with, younger, not younger, but high school aged students. And another one they had was standoff. A standoff entails a derailment of the issue at hand by, for example, changing topics or engaging in another activity. This is also something that I believe works better with younger kids because I believe it's easier to distract younger kids into another topic just to kind of de-escalate their, anger or whatever, feelings that they're feeling in that moment. Just trying to get their attention on something else to help calm them down and calm down the situation. And it can also work, I feel like, with high school or middle school students as well. But like I said, it depends on the situation. And withdrawal is another one. Withdrawal is basically, after the argument has happened, or even while the argument is happening, you want to separate them, right? Just because if they keep getting in each other's face, you don't want them to keep getting closer and closer until eventually maybe someone puts hands on another person. So definitely withdrawal is a good option for high school students, middle school students. Just making sure separating them, putting them maybe in different rooms. If they're outside, just kind of getting distance. Hopefully if there's other people around, they can kind of hold people back from getting closer and engaging, to just stop that engagement basically so that they can just cool off. And then, like I mentioned, a third party, if there's other people kind of seeing what's happening, they can intervene and just try to get everyone to come together. Just that good mediator, just having a mediator to help kind of get everyone's points across. Why are people upset? Giving people that opportunity to share their perspective, because oftentimes, arguments will start because other people are interrupting each other and you're not really getting the full story of why each person is upset. So taking that time to listen and letting them each share their perspective without interruption is very important. And yeah, so I feel like those are kind of the main points, different options for people to try, for youth to try, and try to learn about conflict resolution. But one of those things, like I mentioned with third party, another example of that could be something called peace circles. And peace circles are something that me and my staff have been trained to actually do in person. Even it could be over Zoom too, but in person is probably the best way to, make sure you're actually connecting with the people around you. And what peace circles do, essentially, you're literally in a circle, and so everybody is facing each other. We establish ground rules with people. Like, these are the rules that everyone is going to respect to be a part of the peace circle. Talk about basically the point of the peace circle, right? So making sure everybody has an opportunity to share, creating a safe space, and hopefully resolving it at the end. But yeah, I feel like those are some good solutions. We haven't had to use peace circles yet, but it is there when we need it. And it's a good thing to have in your toolbox for those interested. You can look up trainings online too. But yeah, I feel like that was a really interesting thing that I had learned about that I wanted to share with you all. And I hope that you all had learned something today about conflict resolution, what that is, how to work with youth who may be struggling with that. And I will be back next Thursday, like I said, with a guest. And I hope you all have a good rest of your Thursday. Thank you so much for watching and have a good night. Bye. Thank you.